Today's World Insight. China's Import Expo in full throttle, on the path to recovery. How it could benefit the world, in the words of the World Economic Forum founder.
What is needed is a global rules-based system.
And a new expo space for public health and pandemic prevention. What it means for big farm companies, from the Merck CEO.
The pharmaceutical industry is collaborating in an unprecedented way in finding solutions to this crisis.
This is Shanghai, and behind me it's its skyline. It's the largest city in China. It's a global financial hub. And in recent years, it takes on a new role. The city that hosts China's largest import expo, CIIE. Enormous amount of investment have been put in here. The venues, the exhibition areas, and of course the prevention and control measures against the pandemic in this huge scale event. But with many economies forced to a standstill due to the novel coronavirus outbreak, the opening of this Import Expo demonstrates China is ready to share its huge market opportunities and contribute to the world's economic recovery. But looking ahead, challenges do come in abundance. Klaus Schwab, a founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, knows all that too well. On the sideline of the CIIE, I had an exclusive interview with him. I asked him what he considers as the biggest risk among all the challenges the world is facing today, and how leaders, including business leaders, need to be prepared in the middle of constant change. It's an eventful year and eventful days recently. We still do not know at this time of the interview the result of the U.S. presidential election, but what do you make of the uncertainty even about the election itself, and certainly its impact for the next 4 years?
We have to be aware that independent of the election, we are in a situation with great uncertainty. And actually, we have at the moment 3 or 4 major challenges in the world. First, many countries still have to fight the virus. And then second, they have to reconstruct, they have to rebound. And I'm happy to know that China has gone through those 2 phases and is now in some way post-corona. But in the post-corona time, we have to define also new policies to make the world more cohesive, more resilient, more inclusive, and more sustainable. And here we have to deal simultaneously with quite a number of issues like revolutions, aging, and so on. So the world which we will face in the future will be a very turbulent, a very challenging world.
Will geopolitics be the major issue there? As China-U.S. relations has been a thorny issue for the world over the past 1 year or 2.
Yes, what we need, of course, is much more global cooperation. Of course, we are in a competitive situation, and it's clear that China and the U.S. as the 2 most important economic powers are in a particular stage of competition. But what we need is what I would call cooperative competition or competitive cooperation, which means competition should not be a fight. Competition should be to define what is in the common interest, what are our common issues, how should we address those issues, and of course there's still a competition going on, and I think China has well captured it in the dual circulation development, which means, on the one hand, to foster the internal market, and on the other hand, to see how simultaneously global cooperation could be strengthened.
But Professor, do you think that the leaders would listen to your advice? You've been interacting with them for a long time. This is already your 13th U.S. presidential election as an observer over the past few decades. Do you think the leader would listen to you?
At least I hope so. And I'm quite optimistic because when we look back at the 50 years since I have created the World Economic Forum, the world has made substantial progress. Just look at China, look at quite other countries where poverty is being substantially reduced and so on. I believe in an always better future for humankind. So I also believe that at the end, even if we have different opinions, that we will recognize, as President Xi expressed it in Davos in 2017, we are part of a global community with a common destiny. So I think at the end, we will have the force and the willingness to address those issues which require global responses together.
Then, Professor, what do you consider as the big uncertainty, or shall I say the biggest uncertainty, if it's about geopolitics? Would that be the uncertainties of the U.S. leadership for the next 4 years? Or it is going to be the rise of China, which most in the world, particularly in the West, still have a lack of knowledge, shall I say, at this moment?
I think it's not just one challenge. Of course, cooperation between the U.S. and China will be key to address many of the challenges which we face. We have black swans in the world. We were very surprised by the COVID-19 virus, which had a very damaging effect on the global economy. But there are other issues to be resolved, and we do not know, by the way, we do not know whether we will not have to fight another virus in the near future. But let me just address one of the challenges which we have. The fourth industrial revolution based on the research which the World Economic Forum has done, will require to retrain and to reskill and upskill about half of the present workforce around the world in the next 10 years. Because we need new skills, we need new cases. The new technologies have a strong structural impact in many ways on our individual lives, but also and particularly on the labor market. So how to make sure that everybody has decent work, I think will be one of the major challenges in the world. How we address also the issue of climate change. And I'm very glad to have heard the commitment of China to achieve a zero net situation by 2060. So many challenges to be resolved, and all of those require global cooperation.
Professor Schwab, in your latest book, The Great Reset, which will also have its Chinese version, by the way, congratulations on that, you talk a lot on the Great Reset, but that is depending on the time, or shall I say the schedule of the pandemic. But we have seen the second wave, particularly with the winter approaching. in different parts of the world. So when are we going to see, really, the reset that you emphasize once and again in that wonderful book?
Yes, China has to play a major role because it is out of the what I would call the hot phase of the pandemic. Of course, we do not know how the virus at the end will evolve. Will it come back even in China? I don't hope so. But even those countries which are still in the what I would call the hot phase, I think they have to think about the after the post-corona era. And that's exactly what I'm addressing in the book. What are the deficiencies in our systems, in all our systems, the economic system, social system, geopolitical systems? What are the deficiencies, and how much are we now challenged to address those deficiencies? Let me just give one example. Mm-hmm. We had a tendency in the world towards a lack of equality and fairness, also driven by the fourth industrial revolution and driven in addition by the virus. We have the need to create much more, let's say, inclusive societies. We cannot leave people behind.
Having said that, the World Economic Forum has been very efficient when facing up to the pandemic. I remember very clearly, Professor, at the very beginning of this year when the World Economic Forum was underway, the news came out about COVID-19. And you have assembled experts and also leaders from the healthcare sector, from business sector, together to jump immediately on the issue and try to work out solutions and build a platform, just as you mentioned, Professor. But then it's a test of leadership, isn't it? At the time of crisis, whether people will be able to rush to the front line and do what they need to do and build, as you just said. But whether the leadership right now is up to the test, that's a big question mark. Professor Schwab, you've been dealing with leadership every year at the World Economic Forum. You ask them tough questions. You try to corner them into making commitment. But what do you think about the quality of leadership these days, Professor?
Yes, we just published our jobs report, and we defined the new skills which are needed today in a world which is overwhelmed by uncertainty and complexity. And those skills are problem solving, they are system thinking. You see, in the old world you could extrapolate and you could see in which direction the world is moving, and you could see it with great probability. Today, there's uncertainty, and what we need is much more an approach where we create scenarios. What could happen? We at the Forum, for example, looking at the next annual meeting in Davos, we have to take different scenarios. We have to, the next annual meeting, not necessarily in Davos, it could take place somewhere else. Mm-hmm. So we have to say what is happening if by early next year the vaccines give us the possibility to meet the game. But then there's another scenario which is, no, we will be able to meet the game only late next year. Or finally a scenario which means it will take until 22. So that's the world of today. You have to see what could happen, not what will happen, what could happen, and then to be prepared for each of those different scenarios. And to adapt very rapidly if the situation changes. So the word agility comes to my mind.
There are concerns, Professor, though, that what one talks about multilateralism might not be necessarily the multilateralism in the other's eyes. For example, there is a danger, some suggest, some politicians might use the phrase of multilateralism for small groupings and try to exclude some of the other countries. Maybe they try to do something among the developed economies through OECD and exclude the emerging economies and developing countries, and vice versa. So, Professor, how do you see really, how inclusive will multilateralism be? That's probably an interesting question, isn't it?
We do not know yet, and I think there are two scenarios. The first scenario is, of course, a positive one, that we have the courage to create win-win situations, to work together, I repeat, global cooperation, to address the issues and the challenges jointly. The other danger, which is the more pessimistic outlook, is or the other scenario, which is really danger for the world economy, is that the world falls apart in different, let's say, regional groupings. That's what you have in mind. And we have to fight this situation as much as we can, because this will be a lose-lose situation. It will be coming back to a situation where when you travel around the world, you need different, let's say, technologies. You have, I remember the time when I traveled around the world 20 years ago. I had to take 2 or 3 phones because there were different standards. I think that's what we have to avoid. It's not in the interest of any individual and not in the interest of any country to create such a confrontational situation.
When you say we have to fight, who are the we that you are referring to? Is that the business that will be the partner? Is that the governments? Will governments be really looking at the same horizon? Are you talking about the civil society? You have been illustrating in the Great Reset, your latest book, about the different roles that different parties of the society these days could play. Who are you referring to, Professor, when you say we?
I think every stakeholder of global society is challenged here. It's a joint effort which is needed of governments, of business, of civil society. Everybody has to play its own, or has to make its own contribution so that the world falls not apart. And here, the World Economic Forum is certainly a platform to bring all those actors together with the objective to strengthen global cooperation.
In early November, the Shanghai Import Expo is taking place. You were there, Professor, over the past 2 years. So anything to share? Many believe this is a rare occasion for this year when the pandemic is still threatening us. It is an in-person exhibition, and the exhibition area has been even expanded this year than last year. So it's quite a showcase over there. It's also trying to showcase about cooperation. But Professor, do you think the message will get across?
Yes, I think it will be the first big event, in-person event. I think it will be very welcomed. Of course, we have learned to do video conferencing, and we have seen that video conferencing, virtual interaction, can replace in many ways coming together. And of course, this will have a major impact also in the future on the travel industry. But on the other hand, I think the personal contact is very important. I feel to really build trust, you need the personal contact. You have to look, I see you, of course, on the screen, but being together it provides this feeling of, let's say, emotional linkage. And so I see an event like Shanghai now very important to show it's possible again to come together in person. And I'm also very optimistic about the future of the World Economic Forum, because many people have asked us, how will it impact the forum? I'm optimistic that people will have a need, maybe in a little bit different ways, to come in person together again. And it will be the combination of in-person and virtual interaction which will make interaction and cooperation particularly effective.